Hi. In this video, I wanted to briefly go over some items you can find in your grocery store, wherever you live. And as discussed in the previous video, some of the things you might have to find online if they don't carry them in your store. But I wanted to give you a few tips and tricks about where to find certain items in each section of your grocery store. So let's start off with produce. When you are looking for produce, you want to be looking for organic if you can afford it, and you want to be shopping local if you can afford it. You also want to be avoiding fresh foods that are genetically modified. The two most genetically modified produce items in the US are soybeans and corn. Everything else in the produce section should be safe. It's rumored that we're gonna have a GMO potato coming out, so maybe keep your eyes out for that so you can avoid it. But for now, if you're eating most of your foods from the produce section, you should be protected from genetically modified ingredients. I wanted to show you this. I buy ginger in my produce section, just like a big hunk of root like this, and turmeric. Mine comes from my store, comes from a little package like this. It'll be in different packaging from different stores. Just kind of looks like this little carrot root. So when I find these items, I usually just keep my big ginger root in my freezer and then just grate on a microplane grater when I need it. And I usually break my turmeric, this is from my freezer, into little 1-inch or half-inch chunks. If I'm gonna put it in a smoothie for my whole family, I'll do a slightly larger chunk. If it's just for me, then you can do a slightly smaller one. And I just keep these in my freezer and throw them in my smoothie every morning. That's a great way to get fresh turmeric. I do a similar thing with my fresh garlic. It's really great to eat your garlic fresh. I know it's convenient to get it in the jarred variety, but you get a lot more health benefits from preparing it fresh in your kitchen. So getting a garlic press and then separating your garlic into its little individual bulbs, and you can keep these in your fridge or even in your freezer so that you can grate them into your dishes or chop them as needed. I wanted to give you one more little tidbit. When you are buying crucifers, so the crucifer family is broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kale. There are a whole bunch more, but those are the ones that are coming to mind. If you prepare them 45 minutes before you cook them by chopping them, it releases a special enzyme that makes it more protective in your body against cancer. That enzyme that is created is called sulforaphane. If you buy kale, broccoli, cauliflower already pre-chopped or chopped in the frozen section, that enzyme will have already been released. But if you buy a head of a crucifer, you need to make sure and chop it 45 minutes before you prepare it to give that enzyme a chance to activate. All right, let's move on to our next section. Okay, let's jump into the dried goods section. If you're really lucky, you will have a grocery store with an amazing bulk section where you live. If not, don't worry, you'll still be able to find what you need down the aisles. You want to make sure to find some really good spices that you enjoy. These are giant containers of spices that I really love. Start small to try stuff out, and then if you love it, invest in a big one. You'll find that when you're first stocking up on a plant-based pantry, there will be a little bit of cost involved, at the beginning. But once you transition over, your grocery bill is going to cut by at least a third, but closer to a half when you're cutting out processed junk, dairy, and meat. Your grocery bill is going to go way down. In my bulk section is where I get my favorite Cajun seasoning blend. You can find this just down the regular aisles too, but check out your bulk section if you have one at your store. I also get my beans in my bulk section. Black, pinto are my two favorites. And then just keep in mind, when you are getting oats, you want to either be getting rolled or steel cut, is what they look like. These are the healthiest varieties, the ones with the most amount of fiber that are closest to whole in the oat family. The rest just are too processed and go through you too quickly and don't give you the fiber that you need. Another great alternative to add to your baking, or like pancake mixes, muffin mixes, things like that, is some chickpea flour. It's really high in fiber and a great source of plant proteins. So including that, like subbing out maybe a half a cup to a cup to replace regular white flour, just does a lot to get an extra boost of nutrition. Keep in mind, when you are eating the batter, it doesn't taste as good as just plain white flour, but once it's cooked, it tastes just the same and you won't notice that it's there. And then your pastas. There are so many varieties of pastas right now. People do brown rice, there's like a quinoa pasta, a lentil pasta, you got your whole grain pastas. Personally, I just still stick with plain, semolina wheat pasta because that's what I digest the best, but mess around with the different textures and flavors and see which one you like. And last but not least, a major winner at our house is just buying popcorn kernels from the bulk section that we can just make our own popcorn at home. So you want to be getting your grains whole or as close to whole as you can. You'll also be able to find quinoa, brown rice. Try to avoid minute rices and quick cooking rices just because they're missing a lot of their nutrition and fiber. So you want to be eating the whole grains, and that's what you're looking for when you're looking for your dried goods and your dried grains. All right, let's talk about what we're looking for when you go into your canned goods section. We want to be looking for cans that are BPA free. You can Google the brand of canned good that you're buying to see if the lining is BPA free. BPA is a chemical substance that messes with our hormones, so we want to be avoiding that. My local grocery store carries canned goods that are BPA free. And then when you're buying canned beans or other canned goods, you want to be looking for low sodium. And then if you can't afford it, get organic if you can. Low sodium for soy sauce is a really great alternative. We use soy sauce a lot, so want to make sure that's low sodium as well. And then try and get low fat varieties of your plant-based mayos where possible. When you're purchasing peanut butter, you want to find a type of peanut butter that is only peanuts and salt, and that's it. Most of the popular peanut butter brands today are filled with lots of other things that you don't need. You're getting plenty of fat from just plain peanuts. You don't need any added fats or sugars. Another great option is at your store if they have the option to grind it yourself. It's going to give you a slightly different texture. I find it to be really delicious, but in my baked goods, I really like a smooth, creamy peanut butter. So this is the one that I was able to find. It's the cheapest option at my local Smith's, and it also happens to be the healthiest one. And during these next 4 weeks, I'm going to be showing you a few delicious sauces that I make at home so that I can make sure that they are oil-free or at least very low in oil. If you don't have a high-speed blender or you're not ready to step into making your own sauces at home, looking into some vegan salad dressings is a good way to transition over. This blue cheese tastes delicious. And then obviously a vinaigrette. You can also find some other delicious sauces. Asian sauces that you would put on stir fries are gonna all be dairy-free. And those are some great little stepping stones if you're not quite ready to be cooking it all at home, to still be able to get some good flavors in your cooking, but making sure that the sauces you're including are animal product free. All right, let's talk about what we should do if we need to buy processed foods, because in today's world, we know that's gonna need to happen from time to time. I want your focus to be on whole foods as much as possible, but if you do need to buy processed foods, I wanna tell you a few things to watch out for. When you're buying processed foods, that's your greatest likelihood of eating genetically modified ingredients. A lot of ingredient labels will actually state that it has been created using genetically modified foods, but many don't, and they're not required to by law. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. The less processed, the less exposure to genetically modified foods. And why does that matter? So there actually hasn't been a lot of research about how genetically modified foods affect us. The only information I've been given is the correlation studies. So about 15 to 20 years ago, they implemented into genetically modified foods a toxin that disrupted and destroyed the digestive system of insects. And so the insects would die and then they wouldn't be able to eat the plant. But they didn't study the effect that that would have on people, and they still have yet to study that. But surprisingly, or unsurprisingly, 15 or 20 years ago is when we first introduced this toxin into our food supply, and that is when we began to have a major spike in people having Crohn's, irritable bowel syndrome, and other digestive issues. So for me, all I have to go on is that correlation, and I know that correlation does not mean causation, but it's enough to pique my interest and make me want to avoid genetically modified foods when I can. And avoiding processed foods and highly processed foods is the way that I can do that. So here are some foods that are slightly processed but are relatively safe for you to eat. Hummus is a great step away from dairy-based dips, and they have so many varieties and flavors now. If you can make it at home, you're going to avoid adding excess oil. There is oil in store-bought hummus, but it's still a great step in the right direction. Some store-bought guacamoles are actually pretty healthy for you as long as you keep the proper portion size. Remember, a half an avocado a day is a good safe amount of saturated fat. They've also come out with some really great soy and almond-based yogurts. Now, this is not a health food, but it's way better than having dairy-based yogurts, especially for your kids. My family really loves fresh tortillas. We become tortilla snobs, and this is the only kind we'll eat. One day I need to learn to make my own at home, but until I do, this is what we're going to rely on. Now, cereals can be the minefield of processed foods. Pretty much everything down the cereal aisle, I mean, it's like candy in a bowl. That's why it tastes so good. Really high in sugar, really low in fiber. It's not going to keep your kids full. It's going to fill them with processed things and dyes and all sorts of stuff they don't need. This is the only 100% healthy cereal that I've seen at the grocery store. It is full of fiber, there's no added sugar, and it's all whole grains. It tastes like what it sounds like. It tastes really, really healthy. If you add some berries or some chopped apples, if you add some cinnamon and some honey with your soy milk, this can be a really filling, good meal. My kids actually really like this cereal now, but it's definitely not Lucky Charms. These are some other runners-up that aren't perfect, but are still fairly good sources of fiber and pretty low in sugar compared to most of the other cereals. My kids kind of use these as snacks in between meals if they're really hungry and it's not time to eat yet. But you don't want these to be the staple of your diet because they're just not going to give you the same benefit as actually eating whole grains will. If you need to buy processed foods, keep your eye out for genetically modified foods. You want there to be lots of fiber in it, minimal sugar, and minimal fat, and that's a really hard thing to find in processed foods. Also, most processed foods contain hidden milks, milk proteins, milk fats. They are given all sorts of names. And so the more processed foods you eat, the more exposed you are to those chemicals and hormones that can kind of disrupt your system. So if you can avoid them, go ahead and do it. If you do need some processed foods, just tread very carefully.